Hello, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for coming to my big day, my PhD defense, to support me. Before I start my talk, I would like to specially thank my two high school teachers who flew thousands of miles away from Chengdu to attend my defense. And especially Miss Wang, when I was a teenager, she has a great influence on my way to see the world and the life. So she's the one who always encourages me to follow my heart, not the crowd. And I'm going to talk about the crowd today from a unique perspective. I call it inside out. With a focus on the individual crowd members' experiences. So for the people who don't know me well, I did my master here in the Faculty of Industrial Design, and I completed my master thesis with Philips Research on the topic of retail lighting experiences. And afterwards, I became a PhD candidate in the same faculty. And since 2017, I work as a postdoc researcher in a national research organization with a focus on immersive media experiences. And meanwhile, I'm a mother of a 3-year-old daughter, and I'm a cake designer, and I'm running a cafe in the city center of Delft on Saturdays called Cake Researcher. Okay, I will start with the background of my project. So my project was funded by the Dutch National Commit program under the umbrella of AVID's project. So the goal of AVID's project is to deploy and test large networks of wireless sensors for crowd management practices. So we assume if everybody in a crowd is wearing a sensor, we are able to get an idea of what we call the texture of crowd. So I'm going to use some illustrations to tell what do we mean by the texture of a crowd. So this is a crowd. If everyone is wearing a very low-cost and light-weighted sensor, and the sensor can detect each other within a range about 1.5 to 2 meters, we are able to extract a sequence of proximate graphs over time based on the mutual detections of the sensors. So here is an example of what do I mean by proximate graph. So you see nodes on this graph that can be a crowd member wearing a sensor. And the links between the nodes represents, these two crowd members actually are close to each other within the sensor detection range. So, but actually, this is not the ideal graph because in our project, the sensor do not provide any location information. So basically, when you see two nodes are connecting with each other, you only know the two persons are close to each other, but you don't know their absolute position in the crowd. But still, even with this very basic information, we can still estimate crowd size and possible high-density situations in crowds. But we have another solution, just so if we add more context or if we know the strengths of the connections between sensors, actually we can know more about crowds based on these proximate graphs. On the left graph, so you see there are many weak connections. So weak connections means the two sensors detect each other shortly, but the detection breaks soon. So in this situation, we see it's a narrow corridor, and there is quite a congestion, high-density situation in the corridor. And the weak links in between the two crowds can be an indication saying, that's two flows walking through the corridor in opposite directions. And on the right graph, we see many strong links. So that's an indication, or we can see there are social groups in crowds. So that's a way to interpret proximate graphs. So it's sounds promising. So we have a sensor network, we have resulted proximate graphs, but still we are thinking about it's not enough, maybe it's not enough to understand or even predict crowd behavior because only knowing the crowd density flows, it's not enough. Here is an example showing why it's not enough, because usually a happy, a dense, big crowd dancing and singing in front of a stage has no problem at all. But a small crowd, the angry ones, they can impact the crowds dangerously. So that's where my research focused on. So I want to add a psychological information to enrich the proximity graphs. So one of the examples to enrich proximity graph is to maybe color the nodes on these graphs to represent the emotions of crowd members. And in my thesis, I proposed to understand crowd members' experience from 3 aspects. Basically from their well-being, their emotional experiences, and their behavior tendencies. But in my today's talk, I only focus on the first 2 aspects, so mainly the content, chapter 3 and chapter 4 of my thesis. Here I share you some interesting findings. So this is actually an accident. So when we are researching on the requirements of crowd well-being, we accidentally found crowds can be divided or categorized into 2 main types. So the first one, we call it event crowds. So event crowds are a type of a crowd where people want to join, they want to enjoy the activities, or they want to interact with people in that crowd. So examples can be conferences, concerts, festivals, matches, so that people go there, they want to enjoy. And another type is called non-event crowds. So non-event crowds usually do not have any activity or event. So people usually go there because they want to achieve some external goals or get some benefits from it. Typical examples can be people take public transportations to get to their destinations, or people queuing up for goods. Of course, the well-being needs are different in these 2 types of crowds. So for event crowds, people are pursuing some higher level needs, like relatedness. So they want to feel belongingness, they want to feel connected with others, and they want to be autonomous because so they feel independent and self-decided. They also want to be competent, so they want to feel capable and effective in doing things. And of course, pleasure is one of the main reasons for them to join this crowd. But in non-event crowds, people's main concern are usually the safety. So they want to feel safe and in control, and they also want to stay informed all the time. Next, I want to share with you an interesting explorative study to try to measure real-time crowd emotions. So I designed an application, mobile application, based on Russell's arousal valence model. So this app can basically support people to report 4 categories of emotions, namely happy, calm, and angry, and bored. So I conducted a series of user studies to design the cartoons to represent the 4 categories of emotions, and also to decide where should I position those emotions on a circular interface. And most importantly, because we are going to use this app in a music festival, we want to find a reward mechanism to motivate people to use the app. So the final solution is to give them free drinks so they can report more emotions as I need. So I show you a film clip here about how to use the app. Okay. So first you report your own emotions. And next, you see the emotion of a crowd members around you, and you report also their emotions. And then you have a virtual cup gradually filled up, and you can get a free drink at the bar. So that's the main functions of this app. So we do it in a playful way to collect emotion reports from crowd members. And we test this app at an annual music festival in the industrial design engineering faculty, and usually we call this festival IO Festival. And in the end, about 10% of the visitors used this app. So they are kind of an emotion indicator for us. So they walk in the crowd, they use the app to report their own emotions and the perceived emotions of the crowd members. And we found the received self-reported emotions can actually predict crowd movements. So there is a situation when the DJ performances were really bad on the stage. So we received negative emotion reports from many crowd members, and we also observed people actually moved away from the stage to outside areas. And we also received some interesting feedback about from them. They're saying, oh, it's really a nice way because they can use this app together to show their dissatisfactions towards the bad DJ performances. Okay, that's a nutshell of my research. I only share you like 2 chapters of my content. So in my research, the goal is to add a psychological layer of information on top of the technologies like the sensor data. So in the future, I would like to see more methods to measure this kind of psychological information automatically and non-intrusively. Another thing I'm thinking about is if we can find sensors that can provide precise locations of crowd members that can already be helpful to link the sensor data with the psychological measurement. Thanks for your attention. That's my talk for today. And you have about 10 minutes break, and my defense will start at 12:30. Thank you.